Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Historical Gamer once again, and I'm returning to Commander the Great War. It is turn 51. We're moving into the summer of 1916. The Russian juggernaut is still a serious threat on the Eastern Front. Meanwhile, my Ottoman offensive is driving deep into the heart of the soft underbelly of Russia, if you will. The Caucasus is all but ours, and we're now driving into kind of the heartland of Russia, into sort of southern Ukraine. We may drive towards Sevastopol or try and drive north on Moscow in some kind of desperate attempt to limit the Russian offensive against Austria and Germany. The front against Germany has, I don't want to jinx it here before the Germans or the Russians move, seems to have stabilized somewhat, at least, as we've destroyed several Russian units around Moscow. We surrounded several units that were driving on Hamburg and destroyed those, and have at least restored the semblance of a front line along the Berlin to Leipzig front. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, things are stagnant, as they historically were in 1916, with very little movement along that front line. We've had to divert some Bulgarian reinforcements to deal with the Russian offensive. You can see there the Bulgarians driving against that cavalry unit, the Russians driving against that Bulgarian cavalry unit along the Baltic coast. Meanwhile, the Navy has been particularly useful in bombarding Russian troops along the Baltic front, if you will. The Italian theater is a little bit fluid, a little bit stagnant, depends on the turn. Not a whole lot of movement, but definitely some back and forth there. As you can see, the French continuing to drive east out of Trieste and attempt to drive on Zagreb at the same time. They're certainly endangering getting themselves cut off there, perhaps being a little bit overextended, as that front does not have nearly enough manpower to justify the length of that front, at least as far as I can see. That's a bit concerning there. The Russians just launched an attack on Berlin and had quite a bit of success there. There's only a 4-strength unit left. If they launch further attacks there this AI turn, I could be in some serious trouble here. As you can see, the French are continually launching their Western Front attacks. They tend to inflict some casualties, but rarely do they actually drive and make any kind of success, and when they do, typically the following turn we counterattack and drive them back. So we'll see if that trend continues. The French occupy almost the entire front line in the west against the Germans, whereas the British have a very small frontage that they hold. You can see here the Russians are shifting some troops around, and so are actually all the Western allies here as well. Man, does that Italian front look bare, though. Venice looks ripe for the taking. I'm sure they've got a unit there. I was hoping to maybe drive in on Trieste, but it looks like the Italians have put a new unit there as well. But I guess we'll see what happens here. It looks like maybe the British Navy is doing something. The British Navy has been humbled greatly. They've lost 2 battleship fleets, which I believe, unless they've actually purchased any new battleship fleets, they're either completely equal with the total number of our fleets of 2 battleships, or they may have one more than us. It's hard to see here. We don't have much intelligence on that. But as you can see here, the turn is over, so we are moving into the next turn. The Germans have 24 artillery rounds. So I think what we'll do here, we'll move this battle fleet over here. They do take up 3 rounds of artillery to drop a bombardment on an enemy, but shore bombardment has been particularly helpful for us. So there we use the cruisers, which only use 1 round, and we used 1 battleship, uses 3 rounds here to badly bloody the Russian army unit there. Now we're going to swap this army unit out of the front with this infantry corps garrison unit in Berlin to freshen up our defense and prevent there being any serious risk of Berlin falling. I don't have a whole lot of other German guns here on the front, so I think what I'll do is I'll use this battleship here to bombard that Russian unit again. So it has taken a hit from 3 different naval bombardments, and then we'll drop an air bombardment down on it as well. So these guys have been bombarded pretty darn well, and go ahead and cut them off, and hopefully we'll there we go. We destroyed them. Okay, so that cavalry unit is badly damaged but should be safe, assuming the Russians don't drop artillery on it, which I'm not sure if they're able to there. So we just destroyed a Russian army unit to the north, and yeah, so that's good to see. Go ahead and... we don't have a whole lot of industrial points. Dig these guys in a bit, reinforce them a tad. I don't know how wise it is to attack these Russian units. It does endanger Berlin a tad, but again, inflicting casualties on these Russians is a good thing to do. I might have had a chance to maybe inflict more damage on this Russian unit. That's caught in kind of a pincer, but we'll just leave it be. Gotta keep that wet. We really don't have any reserves for our Western Front, so priority to reinforcements there, just to keep things in order, keep those troops in good shape here. Russia, we could extend our line one more unit south. I'm not sure. We'll keep that unit as a reserve. Meanwhile, we just cut off a Russian army unit here. So we'll finish it off and destroy it. There we go. So there is a Russian unit destroyed on the Eastern Front. And another Russian unit destroyed here on the Eastern Front. So at least a limited counterattack here against these Russians on the east. Another unit destroyed, so the Russians have lost 3 units now this turn. That seems to be a pattern of the Russians losing lots and lots of men and being able to always reinforce and replace them. Okay, so we'll leave that as it is for now. Meanwhile, on the Italian front, move this German unit down here. Oh no! Intercepted by French fighters. I don't think we can really cut Trieste off, especially not with those British troops there. I don't know if I want to do that. Can I undo that? There's no undo button, is there? Lame. Unless I'm forgetting. No, it doesn't look like it. Anyway. Probably shouldn't have done that. We can reinforce these guys, though. Okay, so we've got a garrison unit here. The enemy certainly is threatening to break out. We could bring a rail unit here to slow them down. So we'll pull our troops out of Budapest. There's some Romanian troops using the rails there to get them to the west front. Zagreb may fall the next turn. I think it's only worth 1 industrial point. I can't see the aircrafts in the way. Meanwhile, our diplomatic situation is 5 to 7 turns we'll be at war with Romania. So that could be an issue, but for the moment we're just going to have to toughen up and deal with the situation as it is. We'll take this turn here to reinforce a lot of our troops along the front. I don't think we have anything in production. It does not look like it. We don't really have a whole lot of resources to pour into reinforcements at the time. The Ottomans certainly want to reinforce those guys. And then we'll upgrade them too. Make them better. Make it harder for the British to attack through the Sinai. Meanwhile, on the Russian front, we're attacking Dnipropetrovsk, or however you pronounce that. I believe this is actually the city that there's a lot of fighting going on right now in the current war, Ukrainian civil war, if you will. Oh, wow. So there's a Russian garrison unit there. Or a Russian garrison infantry there. So we've taken Rostov. We continue to drive. We're going to keep these units stationed here as kind of a reserve, if you will. We're going to pull these guys back toward Akrastran or whatever it's called. Let them kind of sit. This unit's kind of blocking the rail line north, but the Russians do have a garrison infantry unit there. So as I was advancing on Dnipropetrovsk, or however you pronounce that, I think it's Donetsk is how it's pronounced in the west. I believe those two are the same city. I think it's just kind of a name pronunciation difference. Which, by the way, whenever I think of that city, Donetsk, I always think of the movie By Dawn's Early Light, in which Russian military personnel, upset with the kind of detente which had developed between the Russians and the Americans, launch a nuclear strike. They steal a missile and launch a nuclear strike. They sneak it into Turkey, launch a nuclear strike against Russia to prompt a Russian response against America, and then you have a whole sort of World War III or trying to prevent the end of the world type deal break out at the time. So no ships there in the Mediterranean for our boy, but we'll send him into the Adriatic, I think. These guys need to do something. At least we can send this rail line over here. Or we can send them to Zagreb, or into the Zagreb area. Maybe the more intelligent. We'll block its path towards Stuttgart, and we'll advance south into the mountains to kind of shore up the front here. But again, the Italian front is wide open. Not that I have a clear road to Rome or anything, but Italy looks vulnerable, I would say, in my opinion anyway. The Allies have certainly committed some serious resource there. British Army unit here, British Army unit here, French Army unit here, and French Air Force as well, another French Army unit. So the French have deployed 2 full armies. The British have deployed 2 full armies. They both lost scout units there as well. Meanwhile, the British only have 1 army unit on the front in the Western Front. So kind of a different shift with the British having substantial forces deployed against... I don't really need to... Do I? Doesn't cost anything, so we'll reinforce those guys. And... it only takes 1 artillery piece to bombard against the Russians there, so maybe we'll do that. Any chance we have to inflict losses upon the British is a positive experience for me. Or not the British, but the Russians. More casualties we can inflict on them, the better. What I have heard is that the game has a strict adherence to the Russian Revolution taking place in 1917, so I guess there's no real way to accelerate that, which is unfortunate, because I feel like we want to. But as it stands, we've got enough points to purchase some garrison units for Bulgaria, it would appear, and also for Austria, which, again, we need troops badly. We can't really afford to stockpile anything. So those units will go to good use, especially as they'll come into play pretty close to Romania coming into the war. I'm keeping this 1 garrison unit in Gallipoli because I don't really trust the British not to try something at Gallipoli or something, but at least we can rail this Ottoman unit over here. So we got another army unit west. I'm debating pulling one of these garrison units out of the Egyptian front, but again, in the case that the British do break through, which is certainly possible, we want to make sure we've got reserves there to fight them, or if they do some kind of stupid landing or something, we need to be ready to deal with that. I'll pull that ship back a little bit to reinforce it. Maybe move this battleship up here, hoping the Italians take the bait and attack it. This battleship is the only thing preventing me from bombarding and totally changing the front on the Adriatic coast. But as it is, it's there preventing that. So I think that just about does it for this turn. Diplomacy, it doesn't look like there's much threat from anyone except Portugal and Romania coming in shortly. Portugal, while seemingly insignificant, is going to give the Allies military bases here, which will threaten our convoys, which occasionally sneak in through the channel somehow when the British AI is not paying attention. But we'll go ahead and end the turn. We'll move on to turn 53. It'll be mid-June. There you can see British submarines just sank German merchants coming down north from Norway, so that's not good. We might need to get our fleet out there to do something about that, because we can't afford to be losing merchant ships. We can't afford to let the Allies blockade us. We don't have enough resources as it is. Meanwhile, we've done absolutely nothing to interdict the Allied convoys coming across from their colonies, which is a bad thing. I think it's something like 100 industrial points from each one of those. They come in at 10 full-size 10 convoys. So we haven't been doing our due diligence, as the Kriegsmarine has not been launching submarine warfare. I believe that is probably the key reason why we don't see any indication of the U.S. coming to side with the Allies yet. At least that's my perception of it. I could be wrong there. Based on some of the reviews and stuff I've read online, it doesn't seem to be something that happens a whole lot. It doesn't seem to be a U.S. trigger into World War I, but that could be, again, determined by how you play as the Germans. I would hope it would be influenced by how you play as the Germans. I'm not 100% sure on that. I was reading an interesting article, changing gears just a little bit while we watch the AI do their thing. I was reading an interesting article by, what's his name, John something or other. He used to be a professor at the Navy War College before he had a Twitter incident or Facebook or something. Apparently he was married, having some kind of affair. But anyway, and phones and photos, not a good mix, I guess, for a lot of people out there. But he wrote an interesting article about the Christmas truce here just a few days ago. Obviously Christmas is just past, and interesting article about sort of the way the Christmas truce has been interpreted by the media, and it's definitely been played up, and a lot of talk about what happened during the 1914 Christmas truce. A lot of focus on the British playing football with German soldiers, and basically kind of everyone taking it upon themselves to basically practice a policy of live and let live, and kind of pushing the mythology of stupid generals and heroic, noble individual soldiers, and we would have had peace if it hadn't been for the generals and politicians and all of that jazz. And I thought it was interesting because the thing that gets all the attention, all the media headlines certainly, is the Western Front, and very rarely is Christmas talked about on the Eastern Front at all. You don't hear people talking about, the Christmas truce between the Austrians and the Russians. Well, because it didn't really happen all that much. There was certainly a bit more racism, if you will, in the war that was going on between the Eastern countries. And I guess there was one interesting exception to that around Przemysl, which has already fallen here, the fortress city of Przemysl on the Austro-Russian border, where the Austrians had something like 120,000 soldiers besieged in 1914, and both sides did indeed take time to stop and kind of traded coffee, alcohol, and stories and all of that. But aside from that, there really weren't a whole lot of those situations where you had a Christmas truce type situation. So I thought that was interesting. You certainly don't hear that side of the story very often in our histories of World War I. But I thought it was interesting. Thought worth bringing up. There was also the exact opposite of that was an incident between the Austrians and the Russians, where the Russians bombarded the Austrian troops. Where was that? Well, anyway, so I guess it was a bit to the south of Przemysl, probably around this area, where the Austrians were bombarded by Russian soldiers on Christmas, by the Russians essentially intending to break up their Christmas celebrations, and the Austrians then returned the favor a few weeks later. The Orthodox Christmas celebrations actually take place a little bit later in the season. They take place, sometime in January is when the Orthodox Christmas holiday actually is. Okay, so we can see here that we have cut off these two units, so we've limited their supply, so they're not going to be as effective in combat. Still probably not weak enough for us really to attack. Well, we could attack them with those guys. Wow. That was a heck of a lot more successful than I thought it would be. Nice. There we go. Destroying Italian units. is just what we'd like to do. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we just knocked out that Italian troop. We have cut off Trieste, and you can see here Trieste itself is able to be supplied by sea, but the other units around the city are not, so they are cut off. I could try and get in there and bombard them, but I'd certainly expose myself to Italian retribution, which I do not want to do by their battle fleet there. Since here the French seem content to continue to attack that garrison unit, so we'll move in the other one there. There's a little bit of a reserve. I don't know what else I want to do here. A lot of my soldiers need rest and refit. I don't want to throw units that are half strength into the fray, really. But we could at least bombard these Russian horsemen. There we go. So we just destroyed a Russian cavalry unit in front of Berlin. Huzzah. Swing this unit south. It'll kind of protect Berlin a bit. Attack there. So we just inflicted some good casualties. Good results there against those Russian troops. Almost destroyed that unit. Didn't quite finish them off. I think these guys are just going to need to do some reinforcing. These guys free again? Yeah, free reinforcements for them. Those are Bulgarians, so they don't take up German reinforcements anyway. Let's see, we attacked them here, they drove there, so they probably are over here, not in range of naval gunfire. We'll send a cruiser to kind of scout the coast, but it doesn't look like it, so they're not there. We're probably going to want to reinforce that artillery piece here as the Germans. We don't have enough industry left to build a new unit, so we'll use the bulk of it up on that artillery piece as we kind of slowly get it a little bit better. Continue to bombard those Russians who have not launched an attack on Königsberg yet, which is important because that city's worth 12 industrial points. Be a bit of a hit if we lose it. Where do we want to send? We could send these guys elsewhere. We've cut off this Russian unit here in Dieburg, whatever that city is called. Let's see here. I wish you could move artillery and attack with it in the same turn, but apparently you cannot. Stupid Russians inflicting casualties on us. So I'm moving this cavalry unit here to the south. Cavalry, whatever it is. Unit to the south here in an attempt to cut off these Russians. I don't want to just blindly attack them. I don't need to take more casualties than necessary here. But I do want to try and cut these guys off. Because if I can cut this unit off, then I can, seriously limit its ability to be effective without really endangering ourselves. Meanwhile, this Ottoman unit will continue advancing along the river line here toward, I think that's Kharkov, just south of Kursk. So continuing to advance into the hinterland of Russia. These guys will pull back into the city of Akhtaristan rather than being a blocking force on that bridge. Yeah, so Stalingrad's still in our control. I'd be really vulnerable if the Russians are mounting some kind of significant counterattack, but I just think they've got too many forces deployed to the west for that to be a real serious threat. Meanwhile, on the Sinai front here, we don't have any reinforcements to spare. Again, diplomacy says 4 to 6 turns till the Romanians come in. I think I need to get these troops up here on the border. I don't want to provoke a war, but I also need some kind of idea of what's coming. So we'll move those units up more or less as scouts. These troops in Gallipoli actually could forward deploy. I think that's what we'll do. I don't know. I have no eyeballs here, but without Greece being at war, I'm just hoping the British don't try and land at Gallipoli. Because if they land at Gallipoli, we're screwed. But I guess we'll just leave them for another turn or two since they can rail in at a moment's notice. If we can reduce, maybe, knock out this unit and this unit here in the next 4 turns, maybe shorten the front a bit, I think we'll be able to turn the tide enough on the front with Russia that maybe we can spare some troops to deal with Romania. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and end this turn here. I think that's about all we're going to do for this turn. We'll actually don't want to forget about these subs, who I seemingly always forget about. They can provide some valuable intelligence over in the west we can use against the Allies, perhaps. Looks like we're being blockaded here by the French battle fleet. That should just about do it for that turn. So we'll go ahead and end the turn, move into late June, turn 54 of the game. Oh no! Why is the Russian Navy attacking us? What the hell? Where are you guys coming from? Stupid Russians. British attacks in the Sinai continue. Russians seemingly driving on Rostov without any concern for their supply line, so they're going to be cut off next turn. Assuming they don't have significant reinforcements there, which the fact that the game's kind of slowly peering across some of those cities is a little bit concerning for me. I guess we'll see. The main Russian force on the German front is south of Berlin now. Looks like we've driven kind of a gap between them and the forces to the north. I'm hoping we're dealing them some crippling blows, but I just don't know. Russian manpower seems to be so strong. They could have 50 units in reserve that we don't see yet. And it doesn't look like they're slowing their attack towards Zagreb either. Or Zagreb. So they destroyed that air unit in Zagreb. I'm assuming they'll advance into it and take the city. I don't know if that will lift their supply crisis, because they'll have a direct rail line with Trieste, which is a port city, which they have in supply. So not sure how that works. I guess we'll find out here in a minute or so. Continued isolated French assaults trying to perhaps break through on the Western Front. That's the one thing that really bugs me is these units seem to have far too much success in attacking enemy units and inflicting more casualties on them than they on the defender. These units are just charging across no man's land, inflicting casualties on the defenders at no loss to their own. The only thing that's lost is, cohesion, I suppose. But that's a minor gripe. I don't know why that Russian unit would have advanced to the south. That doesn't get them out of being encircled. Although I guess it does. They have an open road to... The AI is probably pursuing its advance toward Belgrade, I assume. I think that... No, not Belgrade. Oh, shit. Russian troops advancing toward Vienna. No! And we have no troops there. Although I do think we have some reinforcements we can deploy this turn. So Vienna is the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So obviously our capital is a little bit vulnerable right now. Belgrade, or not? It's not Belgrade. What is it? Is it Belgrade? Maybe it is Belgrade. Economic deterioration in the Ottoman Empire. Production fallen to 90%. New units for the Austrians and the Bulgarians. Budapest, that's what it is. Belgrade is Serbia. I'm stupid. Anyway, so, oh, nice. We've gotten 4 industrial points. So, Russian advance toward Vienna, capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Go ahead and rail some troops in their way. Again, that's why I was keeping that unit there in reserve. Wow. Man, upgraded artillery certainly is effective. So I think this is what we're going to do. We'll advance here. We'll retake the port city of Stettin. And then destroy that Russian unit. So there you go. 2 Russian units finished off, 1 army unit which was already badly damaged destroyed and the city of Stettin retaken, and another Russian garrison unit here destroyed north of Berlin. So the Berlin front is recovering somewhat. So there you have it. Some good news north of Berlin there. Man, that heavy artillery is darn useful. It's exciting. Yeah, these guys are advancing on Budapest. So I think we'll move this guy here. I don't know why they would have abandoned their trench line, though. That seems a little bit foolhardy. But apparently the Russians are invulnerable to taking more casualties. Anyway, so we didn't destroy that Russian unit, but we inflicted some losses on them. Meanwhile, diplomacy says we've got 3 to 5 turns till the Romanians come into the war against us. The British are still suffering supply penalties for being cut off. They are now in Zagreb. We could cut off Venice, but I don't think we've got the troops to really exploit that move. We could cut off the French troops in Trento, but I think it's best just to stay in our current front line and kind of hold the line as it is. Reinforce these Germans here. Yeah, so here we are. Stupid Russian cruisers. We don't have anything better to do. Let's just destroy them. There we go. Knock out the Russian fleet. Another victory here for the Germans. Everyone's morale is great except the Austrians. The Austrians have been struggling with morale. I think the Bulgarians, rather than reinforce that cavalry unit, are going to be better off producing another garrison unit so they can deal with the Romanians when they come in. At least strictly on the defensive is probably where we're going to be against them to start. But if we can get some trench lines built here along the frontier, it'll be useful. So I think we'll probably rail these guys up. We'll let our submarine get a little bit more intel for us here. Doesn't look like anything much is being planned. Hopefully we can slowly reduce these British troops here that are cut off. I don't think you can ever have them totally out of supply when they're in a city, though. Okay, so the Russians are now cut off. Block their advance on Rostov. And we'll pull this unit back here. Ottoman troops need some reinforcements. There we go. So we got them. Everyone's under strength and exhausted here on this campaign against the Russians here with the Ottoman troops. Really, the army's probably bigger than they can feasibly sustain. They've got plenty of artillery ammunition, though. So start to soften them up. And there we go. So those guys should be destroyed next turn. We'll save the artillery ammo. The Germans, meanwhile, have 43 So I think what we'll do, we got to reinforce some of these guys. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I think I can still... Yeah, okay. So reinforce those units. Still leaves us enough for a full-size army unit that we can call up, which I think we're going to do. So as the Germans are going to go ahead and build a new infantry unit. We haven't had a new one of those in quite a while. We'll do that, and that's really the only thing we can afford to build. So I think that's going to end this video here with our next turn. Unsure of what's going to happen on the German front. Things have really kind of stagnated with these Russian units to the south of Berlin. But things are going all right as we just destroyed 2 more Russian units here. We also have a Russian corps unit advancing on Vienna. We just plugged the gap there with a unit by the Germans railed in, so it'll at least delay the Russians. Meanwhile, we've got a Russian army unit surrounded here to the southeast or to the east of Budapest. I'm hoping, be able to reduce them next turn, assuming no ferocious, miraculous Russian counterattack develops up here in the north, which is certainly possible. Meanwhile, the front is pretty stagnant north of Kolmsberg. Our rear is exposed to the Romanians. They're almost at war with us. They will be shortly. Building up a force to deal with them here before too long. Hopefully we can take them out of the war right away. On the far east front against the Russians, another Russian unit cut off and surrounded, should be destroyed next turn, and Karakov could fall. The Ottomans probably realistically should halt and regroup. Maybe we'll advance south on Sevastopol and take out the Russian naval base there, forcing the Russian Black Sea Fleet into a undesirable situation. The Sinai, as ever, seems stagnant, and yeah, I think our biggest challenge in the coming turns is going to be dealing with Romania as they enter the war here shortly. Portugal, I mean, I don't want to deal with more enemy troops, so if they get deployed to the Eastern Front, it's certainly not something that I want to deal with. The Italian front seems brimming with opportunity. We've got a lot of pretty full-strength units, but they're all trying to kind of hold together a front which is probably too long, much longer than we really realistically want to deal with. But I'm hoping I can reduce these British troops who've taken Zagreb and here within the next turn or so, and then maybe advance into Italy. We might have an opening here. The front is pretty narrow. It's not too hard for the enemy to plug it, but with the number of troops we have here, we may have an opportunity to deal a knockout blow to the Italians as well. So we're about halfway through the game if we're going by turns, but obviously the war could end before then. I guess we'll see what happens. I appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.